Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum dear students. In the previous two lectures, we have covered the topic of physiological anatomy of the nervous system. And in those lectures, we talked about the structural and the functional organization of the nervous system. Today, we are going to start with the topic of synapse and synaptic transmission. We will cover this topic in two lectures. And in today's lecture, we will study about the synapse, its definition. We will learn how to classify the synapses, or we can say we will learn the types of synapses, and we will study the mechanism of transmission of nerve signals across the synapse, and we will study about the postsynaptic potentials. So first we are going to learn what the synapse is. Now synapse is a junction, it's a communication between the two neurons. So neurons are the basic functional as well as the structural unit of the nervous system, and in the nervous system the signals are transmitted in form of action potentials. Now, action potential or the nerve signals from one neuron to the other neuron are transmitted through the synapse, through the junction which is known as synapse. So, it's a junction between the two neurons by which the impulse from one neuron is transmitted to the next neuron. So, we can also say that synapse is a functional contact of one neuron with the other neurons. So these are different definitions of synapse. In simple words, it's a junction, it's a communication between two neurons. Now we move on to the classification of synapses. Now there are different ways to classify the synapses. There are two major ways in which we can classify the synapses. One is the anatomical classification or the structural classification of synapse, and the other type of classification is the functional classification of synapses. So I am repeating it, that we can classify synapses in two ways. Anatomical classification is there, and the other type of classification of synapses is the functional classification. So first we are going to talk about the anatomical classification. Now anatomical classification is based on the parts of the neurons which take part in making the junction between the two neurons, or which take part in formation of a synapse. When we talked about the physiological anatomy of the nervous system in the previous two lectures, we have also learned about different parts of the neurons. So there are three main parts of the neurons: the soma or the cell body, the axon, and the dendrites. So depending upon the parts of the neurons taking part in the formation of synapse, the synapse can be exodendritic. It means a synapse between the axon of one neuron and the dendrite of the other neuron. Then the synapse can be axosomatic. It is a synaptic connection between axon of one neuron and cell body of the other neuron. Then a synapse can be exoaxonal. Exoaxonal synapse is when the communication between the two neurons is through their axons. So axon of one neuron make the synaptic connection with the axon of the other neuron. So that's such kind of synapse is called as exoaxonal. Then a synapse can be somatodendritic. A synapse is called as somatodendritic when the cell body of one neuron makes a synaptic connection with the dendrite of the other neuron. So somatodendritic. Then synapse can be dendrodendritic when the dendrite of one neuron makes the synaptic connection with the dendrite of the other neuron. And the last type is somatosomatic. It means a synaptic connection between the cell bodies of two neurons. Or we can say when cell body of one neuron makes the synaptic connection with the cell body of the other neuron, such a synapse is called as somatosomatic. So these are different types of the synapses based on the anatomical classification. And in this diagram we can see the different types. We learned that it can be exodendritic. Exodendritic is the most common type of the synapse. So exodendritic, when axon of one neuron, this is the axon, this is its terminal part, makes the synaptic connection with the dendrite of an other neuron. So this is an other neuron, these are the dendrites. So if the synaptic connection is between the axon of one neuron and the dendrite of the other neuron, this is called as exodendritic. Then it can be exosomatic, where synapse is between the axon of one neuron and cell body of the other neuron. So this is the cell body. If the synapse is between axon and the cell body, it is known as exosomatic. Then it can be exoaxonal. Exoaxonal is when the two axons make the synaptic connection. So this is one axon from one neuron, this is the other axon, and when there is a synaptic connection between the two axons, this is called as exoaxonic or exoaxonal synapse. The less common types are these: the somatodendritic, dendrodendritic and somatosomatic. Here is the example of a dendrodendritic synapse. You can see here the dendrite of one neuron making the synaptic connection with the dendrite of the other neuron. So this synapse is dendrodendritic. So these are different types of synapses based on the anatomical classification. Now we move on to the functional classification of synapses. Functionally, the synapses can be divided into two types: electrical synapses and the chemical synapses. So functionally or physiologically, there are two types of synapses. Number one are the electrical synapses and number two are the chemical synapses. So first we are going to learn about the electrical synapse. Electrical synapses, although they are not very common, and they mainly occur in the CNS, in the central nervous system. An example of the part of the central nervous system that has electrical type of synapse is the mesencephalic nucleus of the trigeminal nerve. So trigeminal nerve is a cranial nerve. Mesencephalic nucleus is the nucleus of the trigeminal nerve. So in the mesencephalic nucleus of the trigeminal nerve, we have the electrical synapse. Now what is the electrical synapse? In case of electrical synapse, the impulse from the presynaptic neuron is transmitted to the postsynaptic neuron electrically without the involvement of the neurotransmitter. That is, there is direct flow of the ions from the presynaptic neuron to the postsynaptic neuron, or we can say there is direct flow of the ions from one neuron to the other neurons. Now how is this made possible? This is made possible because of the presence of low resistance electronic or electrotonic gap junctions. So electrotonic gap junctions are present between the adjacent neurons, and these gap junctions or the gap junctions ion channels allow the direct flow of ions from the cytoplasm of the one neuron to the cytoplasm of the other neuron. So that is an electrical synapse in which ions from the one neurons, they flow to the other neurons through the gap junctions, and there is no involvement of the neurotransmitter. Remember that it is without involvement of the neurotransmitter substances. Another very important characteristic of the electrical synapse is that it can transmit the nerve signals bidirectionally. When we will talk about the chemical synapses, we will learn that in chemical synapse there is transmission of nerve signal from the presynaptic neuron to the postsynaptic neuron only, and the transmission cannot occur in the reverse direction. But in case of the electrical synapse, the nerve signal can be transmitted in either direction, from the presynaptic to the postsynaptic, or in the reverse direction. So we say it bidirectional nerve signal transmission. That is, both ways the signals can be transmitted between the two neurons. Now this is the diagram showing us an electrical synapse. So in electrical synapse we have just studied that there are presence of gap junctions between the two neurons. So this is the presynaptic terminal of one neuron, this is the postsynaptic terminal of the second neuron, and both the terminals are connected through these gap junctions, you can see here. And these gap junctions will allow the flow of ions from the cytoplasm of one neuron to the cytoplasm of the other neuron. And we can see the arrows are in both directions, and these arrows show us the direction of nerve signal transmission. So nerve signal can be transmitted from this neuron to this neuron, or it can be in reverse direction from the postsynaptic terminal to the presynaptic terminal. So this is an electrical synapse. Now move on to the chemical synapses. In case of chemical synapse, the impulse from one neuron to the other neuron is transmitted through release of a chemical neurotransmitter substance. So in case of chemical synapses, a neurotransmitter substance is involved in transmission of the nerve signal from one neuron to the other neuron. Now this neurotransmitter substance is released from the presynaptic neuron, and it binds with the receptors present on the postsynaptic neurons. So again we have a presynaptic neuron and a postsynaptic neuron. The signal will be transmitted from the presynaptic neuron to the postsynaptic neuron only, and it will be through the release of the neurotransmitter substance from the presynaptic neuron. And this neurotransmitter substance will bind with the receptors present on the postsynaptic neurons, and it will produce a change in the postsynaptic neuron, and in this way the signal will be transmitted across the synapse. Most of the synapses in the nervous system are chemical synapses. Now we will move on to the structure of the chemical synapse. A synapse, it has two components, a presynaptic component and a postsynaptic component. In a chemical synapse, there are two components, a presynaptic component and a postsynaptic component. So we are going to see now what are these presynaptic and postsynaptic components. The nerve fibers or nerve fibrils, we should say, divide into a number of terminal branches. Each terminal branch, it has a knob-like ending. It has an expanded ending. The nerve fibers divide into terminal branches, and each terminal branch, it has a knob-like or an expanded ending. This knob-like ending of the terminal branch is known as the synaptic knob. This is also known as terminal button or the nerve terminal. So these are different names for the synaptic knob or the ending of the terminal branches of nerve fibers. each synaptic knob or the terminal button, it makes a synaptic connection. The terminal button or the synaptic knob have the covering of the cell membrane, and this covering of cell membrane on the terminal button is known as presynaptic membrane. Now the corresponding part of the postsynaptic neuron with which the presynaptic neuron is going to make a connection, it also has the membrane which is known as postsynaptic membrane. So we have two components, presynaptic component which is the expanded knob-like ending which is known as synaptic knob or the terminal button, and the membrane covering this part is known as presynaptic membrane, and the corresponding part of the postsynaptic neuron with which a synapse is to be made is called as the postsynaptic component, and its membrane is known as postsynaptic membrane. Now this diagram shows us a detailed structure of the chemical synapse. As we have just discussed that it has two components, a presynaptic component, so this is the presynaptic component of the chemical synapse, and it has a postsynaptic component. So this is the postsynaptic terminal, this is the presynaptic terminal, and the membranes of these terminal are known as presynaptic membrane and the postsynaptic membrane. In the presynaptic terminal, this is the knob-like ending, expanded knob-like ending which is known as terminal button or the synaptic knob. Now inside the synaptic terminal there are two very important structures present in the cytoplasm. One are the mitochondria. You can see here there is abundance of the mitochondria in the synaptic terminal or in the synaptic knob, and there are present vesicles in the presynaptic terminal, and these vesicles contain the neurotransmitter molecules. There is abundance of mitochondria to energize the synthesis of the synaptic vesicles. The membrane of the presynaptic terminal, it has voltage gated calcium channels. Voltage gated calcium channels are present in the membranes of the presynaptic terminal. The space which is present between the presynaptic terminal and the postsynaptic terminal is known as synaptic cleft. So synaptic cleft is the space present between the presynaptic nerve terminal and the postsynaptic nerve terminal. The space is about 200 to 300 angstrom. This is the unit for this measurement of the synaptic space or the synaptic cleft. This is also known as synaptic gap. The postsynaptic membrane in the synapse, it has the receptor proteins which bind with the neurotransmitter. So neurotransmitter is released from the presynaptic terminal, it diffuses through the synaptic cleft, and it binds with the receptors present in the postsynaptic membrane or the postsynaptic terminal. Now these receptors can be of two types. The receptors with which the neurotransmitter is going to bind can be of two types. Either they can be ion channels themselves. So such receptors are called as ionotropic receptors. I am repeating that receptors present in the postsynaptic membrane can be of two types. Number one, they can be ion channels and are known as ionotropic receptors. In case of ionotropic receptors, the binding of the neurotransmitter substance with the receptor will lead to opening of the ion channels, and there will be flux of ions through these channels into the cytoplasm of the postsynaptic terminal or the postsynaptic neuron. In some cases, in other instances, the receptor protein is not an ion channel. Instead, the receptor proteins are coupled to the second messenger system. So in this case, binding of the binding of the neurotransmitter with the receptor protein will lead to the activation of the second messenger system, and such receptors are called as metabotropic receptors. Metabotropic receptors. Activation of the receptors will lead to activation of second messenger system, which in turn will alter the enzymatic activity in the postsynaptic neuron. So that's why they are called as metabotropic receptors. So we have learned two types of receptors in the postsynaptic membrane: ionotropic, which become ion channel when there is binding of the neurotransmitter with the receptor protein, and metabotropic, which alter the activity of the enzymes in the postsynaptic neurons when there is binding of the neurotransmitter with the receptor protein. So the response in the postsynaptic membrane due to neurotransmitter substance can either be a change in the membrane potential, like if there is flux of ions through the ion channels, it can lead to change in the membrane potential, or there can be activation of biochemical cascades, as I have just told you that there can be alteration in the activity of the enzymes within the cells, and this change in the enzyme activity can result in a cascade of biochemical events within the postsynaptic neuron that will produce response in the postsynaptic neurons. Or thirdly, there can be change in the gene expression. There can be activation of gene transcription when there is activation of the second messenger system in the postsynaptic neuron. So this is the structure of a chemical synapse, and we have discussed the types of the receptors present in the postsynaptic neuron, the ion channels, and the receptors coupled to the G proteins. Now we are going to learn the events of synaptic transmission. After studying the structure of the synapse, we can very quickly go through the events of synaptic transmission, and these events of synaptic transmission are almost the same as you have studied in neuromuscular transmission when you did the nerve and muscle physiology. So the first step in the transmission of nerve signal from the presynaptic neuron to the postsynaptic neuron is the arrival of a nerve impulse to the synaptic terminal. So a nerve impulse arises, it reaches the synaptic terminal or the synaptic knob. When it reaches the synaptic terminal, it causes the depolarization of the presynaptic membrane. When there is depolarization of the presynaptic membrane, this will lead to opening of the voltage gated calcium channels present in the presynaptic membrane. So when there is opening of the voltage gated calcium channels in the presynaptic membrane, what will be the effect? Yes, it will lead to influx of calcium ion into the synaptic terminal, which is the presynaptic terminal. So calcium influx is there. Now what will be the effect of the calcium influx? Now calcium is going to bind to the special sites on the presynaptic membrane. These sites are called as release sites. I am repeating, the calcium that moves into the synaptic terminal from extracellular space, from the extracellular fluid into the synaptic terminal, is going to bind with the sites on the presynaptic membrane. These sites are called as release sites. Now due to binding of the calcium with the release site, it will cause an attractive influence on these neurotransmitter vesicles present in the presynaptic terminal, and as a result they will fuse with the presynaptic membrane and they will release the neurotransmitter substance into the synaptic space. Now in the lower part of the diagram we can see the calcium release sites. So this is the presynaptic membrane of the terminal part of the presynaptic neuron. This is a neurotransmitter vesicle and these are snare proteins. Now binding of calcium to this is going to cause a change that will cause fusion of the neurotransmitter vesicles with the membrane of the presynaptic membrane, presynaptic terminal, and this will be followed by the exocytosis of the neurotransmitter into the synaptic space. So here you can see the release of the neurotransmitter substances from the vesicles into the synaptic space. Now what will happen after the neurotransmitter is released into the synaptic space? It will diffuse through the synaptic cleft and it will bind with the receptors present on the postsynaptic membrane. Now binding of the neurotransmitter with the receptors on the postsynaptic membrane, it will lead to opening of the ion channels, and opening of the ion channels will in turn cause influx of sodium ion into the postsynaptic neuron if it is an excitatory neurotransmitter. So here let me briefly tell you that the response in the postsynaptic membrane can be excitatory response or it can be an inhibitory response. We are going to discuss it in detail subsequently, but here we can see that opening of the receptor protein, opening of the ion channels due to binding of the neurotransmitter, here it leads to influx of sodium. Now influx of the sodium into the postsynaptic neuron, it will decrease the potential, it will decrease the voltage in the postsynaptic membrane, and this will produce a response in the postsynaptic neuron, and if this voltage change it reaches the threshold value, it will produce an action potential in the postsynaptic neuron. That's how the nerve impulse is transmitted from the presynaptic neuron to the postsynaptic neuron in case of the chemical synapse, which involves the release of the neurotransmitter substance. In the previous slide, we have seen the influx of the sodium ion into the postsynaptic neuron due to binding of the neurotransmitter with the receptors present on the postsynaptic membrane. But we have learned that there are two types of receptors present in the postsynaptic membrane, that is ionotropic receptors, the example of which we have studied in the previous slide, and the other types of receptors are metabotropic receptors, which are receptors coupled to the G proteins. So what will happen if the receptor is a metabotropic receptor? Now in this case, binding of the neurotransmitter with the receptor protein will cause a conformational change or activation of this receptor, which in turn will lead to the activation of G proteins by dissociation of the alpha components from the beta and the gamma components. So activation of the G protein will in turn produce different effects within the cells. Either it can cause the opening of the ion channels, or activation of G protein can cause activation of the other enzymes like adenyl cyclase. It can be activated, or there can be other intracellular enzymes which are activated. So this can initiate a chemical cascade of event within the cell, or it can cause activation of gene transcription. So this will produce different effects or responses in the postsynaptic neuron when there is activation of a metabotropic receptor, that is a receptor which is coupled to the G protein. Now coming to the responses in the postsynaptic neuron. The response which is produced in the postsynaptic neuron is the postsynaptic potential. And this postsynaptic potential, it is produced because of binding of the neurotransmitter with the postsynaptic receptors, which results in a localized change in the potential of the postsynaptic membrane. So localized change in the postsynaptic membrane is known as postsynaptic potential. This change is the change in the voltage of the postsynaptic membrane. The postsynaptic potential, it can be of two types, EPSP and IPSP. Now what is EPSP? EPSP is an excitatory postsynaptic potential. Excitatory response in the postsynaptic membrane. Excitatory postsynaptic potential. The other response can be inhibitory. As I have just told you that there are two types of responses can be produced in the postsynaptic neuron, the excitatory response and the inhibitory response. So excitatory change is the excitatory postsynaptic potential, and inhibitory change in the postsynaptic neuron is known as inhibitory postsynaptic potential. I am repeating, inhibitory postsynaptic potential. First, we are going to talk about the excitatory postsynaptic potential. Now, excitatory postsynaptic potential is a localized hypopolarization produced in the postsynaptic membrane. I am repeating, it is localized hypopolarization produced in the postsynaptic membrane, and in most of the instances, the excitatory postsynaptic potential is produced due to influx of sodium ions. That is, the release of the neurotransmitter from the presynaptic terminal it causes the opening of the sodium channels in the postsynaptic membrane, and when there is opening of the sodium channels in the postsynaptic membrane, there is influx of sodium ions into the postsynaptic neuron, and this produces hypopolarization. So it is excitatory postsynaptic potential. Now it is a graded response. So there are certain properties of the graded response or the excitatory postsynaptic potential. That is, number one property that is possessed by EPSP is that it is a localized change, as we have enumerated it in its definition as well. It's a localized change which is produced at the site where the neurotransmitter is released, and it is bound with the receptors present on the postsynaptic membrane. It is a localized change and is non-propagating. This is contrary to the action potential that you have studied in nerve and muscle. That action potential is propagating, self-propagating. That is, once it is produced, it will propagate from one end of neuron to the other end. But EPSP, it is a localized response which is non-propagating, and it is decremental in character. By decremental in character, we mean that it decreases with passage of time. The response declines or decreases, and it does not obey all or none law. It is a graded response, and the magnitude of the response, it varies with the quantity of the neurotransmitter being released from the presynaptic nerve terminal. So if there is a greater quantity of the neurotransmitter released from the presynaptic nerve terminal, the magnitude or the voltage of the excitatory postsynaptic potential will be more. Or if there is less quantity of the neurotransmitter released from the presynaptic terminal, there will be less opening of the ion channels, less influx of the sodium ions into the postsynaptic neuron, and obviously this will reduce the magnitude of the excitatory postsynaptic potential. The excitatory postsynaptic potential is a graded response, and it does not have the refractory period. It does not have the refractory period, and it means that the individual EPSPs can be added. One EPSP, if it is produced in the postsynaptic membrane, and other excitatory postsynaptic potential can be added onto it, which is called as summation, and we are going to learn it in detail when we will discuss the properties of synaptic transmission. So here just remember that EPSP does not have refractory period, and duration of the excitatory postsynaptic potential is prolonged as compared to the duration of action potential. Duration of action potential is less, and an EPSP, which is localized graded response, it has a more prolonged duration. Now in this diagram we can see an excitatory synapse, and in excitatory synapse what is produced, an excitatory postsynaptic potential is produced. This is the presynaptic neuron, axon of a presynaptic neuron, terminal button making the synapse with the postsynaptic neuron, and positive signs show influx of the positive ions, and most instances it is the sodium ion that moves into the cell. So influx of sodium, it causes depolarization, and this depolarization it will spread into the other parts of the neuron, but it is decremental in character, that it will decrease in magnitude as it moves away from the source where it is produced. And in this part you can see the graphical recording of EPSP. So this is an increase, it is a hypopolarization. This is the resting potential. So when there is influx of sodium, the negativity inside the cell is going to decrease, and the membrane potential will rise in positive direction, and this you can see it is a graded response, and it is decaying. It is decremental in character. With time the response is going to decrease. Now importance of EPSP is that if it is of sufficient magnitude so that it reaches the threshold for excitation, and action potential is going to be produced. In the same way you have learned about the end plate potential produced in the skeletal muscles. Okay, that end plate potential, which is a graded response, if it reaches the threshold for excitation, the action potential is produced in the skeletal muscles. In the same way, if EPSP is of sufficient magnitude to reach the threshold for excitation, it is going to produce an action potential in the postsynaptic neuron. And always remember that action potential in the postsynaptic neuron, it is produced in the initial segment of the axon. Action potentials cannot be produced in the cell body or in the dendrites. Again, I am repeating that action potential is produced in the initial segment of the axon. Initial segment is the first segment of the axon, is the point from where the axon is arising from the cell body. So here the action potential is produced, and action potentials are not produced in the cell bodies and in the dendrites of the neurons. This is because of the fact that voltage gated sodium channels are involved in generation of action potential. Again, I am repeating that in generation of action potential, voltage gated sodium channels are involved, and these are present in the axons and in the initial segment of the neurons, while the cell bodies and the dendrites do not have the voltage gated sodium channels. So since they do not have the voltage gated sodium channels, so action potential cannot be produced in the cell body and in the dendrites. So that was about the excitatory postsynaptic potential. Now coming to the inhibitory postsynaptic potential, which is the second type of response that can be produced in the postsynaptic membrane or the postsynaptic neuron as a result of binding of the neurotransmitter with its receptors. It is an inhibitory response So it is hyperpolarization. So inhibitory postsynaptic potential is a localized hyperpolarization. This is exactly opposite to excitatory postsynaptic potential. Excitatory postsynaptic potential is hypopolarization, while inhibitory postsynaptic potential is hyperpolarization. So it is a localized hyperpolarization which is brought about due to either the efflux of potassium ions from the cytoplasm to the ECF in the postsynaptic neuron, or it can be due to influx of chloride into the postsynaptic neuron. So what happens in this case? There is release of the neurotransmitter from the presynaptic neuron. This neurotransmitter binds with the receptors on the postsynaptic neuron. Now, binding of the neurotransmitter with the receptors on the postsynaptic neuron will cause opening of the ion channels, through which either there will be efflux of the potassium. Potassium, we all know, that is high in concentration within the cells. So when there is opening of the ion channels, potassium leaves the cell and moves to the ECF. This will decrease the concentration of positive ions inside the cell, and this will produce hyperpolarization. Or what can be there? Or there can be the influx of chloride. So binding of the neurotransmitter with the receptors on the postsynaptic membrane will open the ion channels, through which there will be influx of the chloride. Chloride will move from outside to the inside, and we know that chloride is a negatively charged ion. So when there is influx of negative ions into the postsynaptic neuron, this will cause hyperpolarization. The response in the postsynaptic neuron, it depends upon the type of the receptors that it has. So a neurotransmitter can be excitatory if there is influx of sodium into the postsynaptic neuron, or a neurotransmitter can be inhibitory if there is efflux of the potassium or there is influx of chloride into the postsynaptic neuron. So a neurotransmitter can act as excitatory or an inhibitory neurotransmitter depending upon the receptor with which it is going to bind. Glycine is a neurotransmitter which always produces inhibitory postsynaptic potential. It is a neurotransmitter which always produces inhibitory postsynaptic potential. Now there is another type of inhibition that is called as presynaptic inhibition. The inhibition that we have just studied is postsynaptic inhibition, and postsynaptic inhibition is caused by the inhibitory synapses operating at the neuronal membrane. This is known as the postsynaptic inhibition. It is inhibition by inhibitory synapses operating at neuronal membrane. Means the presynaptic neuron releases a neurotransmitter which produces inhibition in the postsynaptic neuron. The other type of inhibition is the presynaptic inhibition. Now in case of presynaptic inhibition, the presynaptic neuron, it has one synapse with the postsynaptic neuron and an other synapse with an other neuron onto the presynaptic nerve fibril. That is, a presynaptic neuron has one synaptic connection with the postsynaptic neuron, while it has an other synaptic connection with the presynaptic nerve fibril of an other neuron. Always remember that these synaptic connections or synapses are not like that one neuron has only one synapse. Instead, there are thousands of synapses present between the adjacent neurons. So, in case of presynaptic inhibition, again I am repeating that a presynaptic neuron, it makes make a connection, makes a synapse with the presynaptic nerve fibril of an other neuron. This synapse, it releases GABA. It's a neurotransmitter. GABA stands for gamma aminobutyric acid. GABA causes the opening of the potassium channels or the chloride channels. Release of GABA, it causes the opening of either the potassium or the chloride channels. And we have just discussed that opening of the potassium channels or the chloride channels are associated with the production of hyperpolarization. But in case of presynaptic inhibition, this hyperpolarization is produced in the presynaptic nerve terminal. And this type of inhibition is known as presynaptic inhibition. And remember that in presynaptic inhibition, GABA is involved. And in case of postsynaptic inhibition, the neurotransmitter which is involved is glycine. So this is the diagram of an inhibitory postsynaptic potential. Now let me draw the presynaptic inhibition for you here in the same diagram. So consider that this is a postsynaptic neuron as is in the same example. So there is a presynaptic nerve terminal making a synaptic connection with it. Now there is another neuron which is going to make a synaptic connection with this presynaptic nerve terminal. So it can also make a synaptic connection with this. So here this is the presynaptic, this is the nerve terminal making the synaptic connection with the presynaptic nerve terminal of another neuron. Now here this presynaptic neuron is going to release GABA onto this presynaptic nerve terminal. GABA is going to be released here. Now what GABA is going to do? GABA will cause a hyperpolarization here in this presynaptic nerve terminal. So hyperpolarization will produce inhibition in this presynaptic nerve terminal, and this type of inhibition is known as presynaptic inhibition. I hope you understand this concept. This is very important, not only from short essay questions point of view, but also it is being asked in the Viva and in the MCQs. And if you have any difficulty in understanding these two points, that is IPSP and the presynaptic inhibition, you can ask me questions on my personal WhatsApp number. Now just summating the responses in the postsynaptic neuron. So this is the resting condition when there is no nerve signal transmission. So when there is signal transmission from the presynaptic neuron to the postsynaptic neuron, there can be either excitatory response as we have just studied, and when there is excitatory response in the postsynaptic neuron, action potential will be produced at the initial segment of the axon and then it will be propagated. And if in the case when there is an inhibitory response in the postsynaptic neuron which is brought about either through the efflux of potassium or through the influx of chloride, there is hyperpolarization within the postsynaptic neuron, and due to this hyperpolarization no action potential is produced in the postsynaptic neuron. So when there is excitation, there is action potential produced in the postsynaptic neuron, and when there is hyperpolarization or inhibition, then no response, no action potential is produced in the postsynaptic neuron. So we are going to stop here, and I hope you understand the lecture. And again I am emphasizing that if you have any difficulty in understanding the lecture, you are free to ask questions. In the next lecture we are going to discuss the characteristics of the synaptic transmission and the factors that can affect the synaptic transmission. Thank you for the listening.